Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. And Julia's been very kind in her words of introducing me. Like she said, I'll give you a little bit of a detail of the talk, and I'll share my slides in a bit. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself and what my background is and why I'm so passionate about what I'm going to talk about today. I am originally from Pakistan, and I think that when I was growing up in Pakistan, I never thought that I would be talking to people like yourselves, very accomplished, intelligent, and amazing people who are passionate about software engineering in general, and so it's an absolute honor for me to take part in this. And Julia and Alan as well have been great mentors and inspirations for me as well. So that's just a little bit of that. But yeah, so today I wanted to really talk about how I got involved in a couple of different teams and in very different roles. So as Julia said, I started my career as a software engineer, and I still consider myself a software engineer at heart. So whatever I do, there is software engineering there, and I really care about the way we develop and the processes and how we implement solution, what's the quality of it, and how we deliver to the wider market, what's the impact, and all that. So that's kind of where my talk comes from, and I wanted to share with you a story of the two teams that I have been working, one that I was working in and the one I am working with now. And really it's very different roles, and as my role changed within the teams, some of the learnings and the journey changed as well. And I hope that some of it would resonate with you. I would be interested in hearing your thoughts about some of the things we did, some of the things you might have tried in your teams, and just your general ideas about those things. So let me just share my screen. One second. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Awesome. All right, so let's start. So this is a little bit of a background on this. So this team that I'm going to talk about is the first team that I joined when I started working for AXA, which is a huge insurance company, a blue chip company. It was an absolute privilege to be involved with that team. And we were working on their policy management system. So that is a huge, all of the insurance policies, there's the central hub of that. And my role, I joined as a senior software engineer, and I was involved in a lot of development activities as well as design and architecture and the like. And eventually I kind of was promoted to the role of a software team leader. And in that company, you had a team of about 8 to 10 people to manage in that. So we had a couple of teams who were working together on delivering this new functionality for policy renewals that the company wanted. So AXA as a company, as you know, makes billions of dollars in profit and is an immensely huge international corporation. Their operation in Bournemouth, which is where I was, it was a fairly small team and had the ability to make a lot of kind of decisions and changes and all that. So fairly flexible. However, like with many kind of big, large corporates, there were some red tape around things. There were hurdles in the way. There was more mismanagement than you would think for a corporation of that size. But one of the key things that hit me when I was working in the team is that even though software was the lifeline for that company, the attention that they did to software or the way they were treated was not like something that is really the backbone of the business. It was rather treated as something which is an expense, and so it wasn't the hub of innovation and activity and fun as you would want it to be. So that really kind of was an interesting thing for me going in. But again, I always keep my mind very optimistic, and I did learn a lot from that. Eventually, when I came into that software leadership position, we had some projects to deliver. And so that was the first time really that I started looking into the process side of things and figuring out what was working, what wasn't working, what were the real kind of bits and pieces of that whole team. So the way I looked at it and the way I like to see it is something like this. This picture kind of reminds me of the situation of that team. It's an old London street, and what's happening here is there are obviously double-decker buses that you see. There are some lorries out there. There are taxis.
You still see your title slide.
You don't. Oh, you don't see the next one?
No.
Whoops.
You may need to unshare and share again. We've seen this problem occasionally.
Oh, okay. Whoops.
Just because I saw your presentation, I knew that was not a picture of a London street.
No, that's it. Okay, that's a bit strange. Let me reshare it. And then, oops.
Yes.
Can you see it now?
Yes, we see it.
All right. Now it is a London street. Okay, so that's again just to explain the kind of picture. So this was a situation in kind of where we were as a team. This is what it felt like. There was so much work coming in. There was no real sense of priorities. Everybody was trying to get through. There was only limited resources, so very narrow road, but everybody is trying to go through. There was nobody calling the shots to tell us which thing to build first. There was no, and there were several priorities coming in from several angles of the business. So this was the situation, and the team felt incredibly kind of demotivated by all of that, what was happening. And there was this huge sense of, oh, we couldn't do anything, we can't do anything, we can't change anything. And there was this huge sense of, just a natural feeling that nothing can change because we are unable to influence anything in this company. So the first thing we kind of started doing, so we sat down together and we started talking about our frustrations as a team. And we thought, okay, so the first thing is we need to understand what our workflow looks like. And can you see the next slide of visualizing workflow or not?
Yes,
you can. Okay, so that must have been just a temporary thing. Okay, so the first thing we did was we decided not to look externally. So this was a real game changer for me and my team, because whereas we were always focused on what we couldn't change in the larger organization, this time round, we really felt that we can look inwards and see where we could control things. So we started looking inwards to say, okay, we know what we can't change. We can't change that mentality, this large corporate mentality where there are several barriers and all that. But what we can change is look inwards to find out how well we are working. Is there something that we might be able to gain out of that? So we started on that, and we ran this huge workshop with everybody involved, and we had lots of sticky notes, and we went up on the walls and started writing down how did we think the work started? So between work ending up in our backlog to work finishing, what are the different stages? And we were amazed to see that everyone in the team had a different idea of how the work was done. So we did not have a mutual understanding of how the work enters our backlog and what are the processes that go in between to then make it successful and make it done and deploy it. So that was a huge thing for us. And then we started figuring out, again, the workshop went into the next stage where we had discussion about several stages of the work, and then saying, what is the definition of ready, and what is are the criteria that it has to fulfill in order for us to be able to pick that work up and starting the code, or even the investigation, and what are the several stages. And then we had an agreement about all of the different stages that we were going to do in order for the work to be done. And we also sat down and we defined what done would look like. What does it mean? Because everybody understood it differently. So by doing that, we were able to create a workflow that was agreed in between the team so that everyone was working in the same way instead of everyone working as an individual, instead of working as a team. And we also kind of limited the number of work, the number of items that were in progress at any one time. What we were finding is that people were starting lots of things. So somebody from some department would come in and tell them that this needs doing, they'll start that work, wouldn't be finished, somebody else would come in and they'll start some other thing. So we were starting a lot and finishing nothing, basically. And so that ended up in that even more frustration where the team just felt blocked all the time. And that was one of the things that we could control. And therefore, we decided that we are going to have a process, and then we'll follow all of those things in order to streamline the work that we're doing. The other thing we noticed is that there was and I understand that a lot of companies have it, but for the size we were in that team for the project, we realized that AXA had followed this huge kind of main principle of saying test engineers and automated test engineers and developers was separate entities. And what would happen is that the developers would develop something where the tester would be just left there hanging, waiting. And then it will get to testing, they'll test it. The developer, meanwhile, would start something else. Then they'll test something and it won't work. They'll throw it back. The developer is now in limbo because you can't start this one, you've got to start a new one. And then that back and forth happened and we could never get any item over the line. So we kind of changed our focus from that approach into saying that all engineers, whether they have test background or development background, get involved in the entirety of the life cycle. And therefore, you could take an item and pass it on to all of those stages, and the tester would be able to, automated testers would be able to do the same. What it did is that it gave us the advantage where there was waste of time when people were waiting. So nobody was waiting. They always had some work to be getting on with. It also helped us increase the speed of development and our efficiency. Another thing worth mentioning is that the testers, the automated testers we had, in terms of skill set, had the same skill set as the developers. They just had a different area, a different involvement in the development. By having these overall involvement in the whole process, they could understand the pain that developers go through, and similarly, developers could understand the aspects that they have to look after while developing when they were writing the test for it. So overall, it helped us become better engineers in the work we were doing. And again, like I said, sometimes that is unavoidable depending on the structure of your organization, but that is something for our size in that team was extremely helpful. We also addressed the problem, and we were very vocal about it. And again, I would, that's not just me, it was the other two team leads that were running their own teams to deliver this project. But we had a discussion with the business, and we kind of laid out a few things after agreeing with our teams on how we were going to move forward. We were. Yeah.
I just want to interrupt again. It looks like
yes,
it looks like the screen sharing is not keeping up. I wonder, Julia, would you like to screen share since it was working for you and you were advancing through slides?
Yeah,
I like me to do
just opened up.
I can do it.
So it's not keeping up, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Hang on.
I can share my screen. You're on clear focus and priorities.
Let me see if I can. I'm wondering whether if I just shared the PDF, would it make a difference?
Yeah, that might be easier because then you can just scroll through it. That's what we share.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just. I'm so sorry about this.
Oh, no problem. We haven't had this problem to this extent before. We actually, David, we didn't do a good enough dry run to see me.
Oh, I do have the PDF all ready to go if you would like me to share it.
Let's give it a go, and then if it messes up again, then please go ahead and share.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So this one, we started having this conversation with the business about the clear focus and priorities, because I think one of the major things that was missing is that we were aligned as the developer leadership team to deliver on this project. However, we felt that a lot of the time elements from the business and within the engineering team, so we were here, we had engineering managers on top of us, then we had the head of engineering, and they weren't entirely focused on making sure that these teams have got a priority. They were bringing in work from all directions, which meant that people were kind of being pulled in all directions. So that was kind of where we changed things, and we had a discussion that this team's focus is on delivery. And we had a lot of buy-in, and I think that within our engineering department, people realized that how they were jeopardizing the projects themselves, and this is nothing to do with the overall organization. And we also started pushing back on additional work, and not just us. This was our teams as well. So everybody in the process was on board with this. And we had clear discussions with the product owners and the business to have priorities depending on, there was some business as usual stuff that we had to look after, and which are the bits that are important to do that in that sense as well. So very, very clear priorities, whereas before we didn't know. So like I showed you in the picture, everybody was trying to go at the same time, and therefore nobody could go. By having priorities, we knew which buses or cars could go at one at a time, because there's only so much throughput you can go through in a team. And another thing is one way in. So another problem we had is the visibility. So whereas a higher manager would go and talk to a team member directly and assign some work, the team lead did not have the visibility of this resource allocation. So we decided that the backlog is the only way in to getting resources allocated. Otherwise, there is no visibility. So very clear visibility of that. And again, it required a lot of conversations, a lot of also almost, I would say, vigilance in terms of the leadership team to make sure the teams are undisturbed, and minimizing the context switching that the teams had to do. And another thing we did is we looked at the cycle time. So from the moment, cycle times for people who are less familiar is the time you start an item. So you start working on it to the time you make it, call it, you by definition of done, it is done. So it is the time from when you start the work to when you finish the work. And we recorded all of the cycle times for all of the items we were doing. But it's not the cycle time per se that was important. The important thing was all of the outliers. So if you see here, the outliers above the line that don't hug the line quite so closely, because they are the ones that cause major delays in our delivery. So we looked at, for the first time, we started looking at the outliers and the reasoning behind why we had some items that were started and took 40 days to finish, whereas on average, we were able to keep it under 6 days mark. And we figured out that a lot of the times we weren't getting response from the business, but a lot of the times it was within the team as well, that from going from one stage to another, things were sitting down in technical lead sign-offs for ages. For example, things were sitting in product owner sign-off for ages. So that means that there was some level of backlog administration and management that was required and wasn't happening, that this was able to highlight. Again, this diagram is, and I would say that any kind of stats that any teams use, and we use them all the time. And some teams felt like initially when we started kind of looking into these dashboards and these graphs, people felt that this is the stick we're going to beat them with. But I would say that, the right way of looking at it is not a stick. We are actually just analyzing where we could make improvements, and that's the only way to look at it. But there is a caveat to that, that in a lot of environments, it is used as a stick to beat people with, which is just the wrong way to looking into this, because people then game the system, and it's very easy to just close tasks when they're not done and create a brand new one every now and then just to get the numbers down. So you don't want that, you want the reality of it. And I think that what made us good in what we were doing is that we were truthful in our numbers, even though they might not look as favorable as we would like them to. And then we did a few things like running experiments, which meant if we wanted to trial something and we thought this might be good and would work for us, we tried it for a couple of weeks. If it was great, we thought, okay, we're going to keep that. If it wasn't, then we kind of discarded the practice and moved on, tried something else. But this constant learning, improving, and allowing ourselves to make mistakes had a huge morale boost. And we're looking at the processes, but not trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, we use Scrum for a bit, we use Kanban for a bit, we used Scrumban for a bit. And actually, in the end, we used some of all of it. And the reason is that I feel that if you go by a certain methodology, you can get too carried away with what you think it's trying to say. Any methodology only is good if it works for you. So we would trial it, and if it doesn't work, we'll change what works for us. And that's what the main point was. And we also paid a lot of attention to the feedback that our developers were giving us through the retrospectives and trying to find those little wins and improvements we could do. So some of the results that we were able to achieve, and this is again, going back a few years, but still a good enough example. And 2019 was before we made all of these changes, and 2020 was the actual teams, the change we could see. And if you can see the productivity level and the number of work items that they completed, there's a huge difference in comparison to the previous year. And you can see like it's not consistent, and it comes up and down, but even when we were at our worst, we were still really, really much more productive than the year before with the same team and the same skill set. The next thing is our efficiency, and that increased, at best it increased by 10%, 10 times more than where we were. And again, the trends generally followed the same line. However, the amount of stuff that we were going through was an insane rate. It was so good that the CIO of AXA wanted to talk to us, and he wanted to know what we did to achieve that. So that was a huge victory for us, and I was very pleased to present all these graphs to him back then. But more importantly, what our team did is to come together as a team and stop being a group of individuals, and we became, and we really gelled together, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. All of that improvement cannot be made in isolation, and therefore it is important that we realize the potential that we have when we come together as people. So some of the comments that we got from team members was, they loved the freedom to make mistakes and learn from them. And they wanted to have the bigger picture. They loved the word that, they wanted to look at the overall picture. They said, we never want to leave for this team for any other, which was a huge compliment. And they liked the way the work was divided. They weren't having merge problems. They weren't having, they weren't having issues where the priorities weren't clear. So they really enjoyed that. And they liked having a leader who was actually leading, and that was really, really great. So that's kind of the story of one team that's nicely coming to an end. The other story, I would say, the story in progress, and the story where Julia and Alan actually even got involved in that. So after all of this work at AXA, I got approached by the 288 group where I work now to head up their system transformation effort. A little bit of a background on 288 group. They are a holding company, and like Julia said, they have collectibles business, or a largely e-commerce based business, and also another kind of an entrepreneurial business by our chairman of babysitting agency, which matches parents with babysitters. So there's a very varied kind of variety, but there you go. The software teams basically deal with all of that. My challenge when I came into this role is to take them into the new world, because the company is 75 years old and they had built COBOL-based legacy systems, which had evolved over the years. And what happened was that those systems had become more and more complex, and they, even though a decade ago they had built a web front end, they had not paid attention to quality, version control, or testing, or documenting anything, or designing, or architecting, or any of those things, which meant that the company realized that it's not only the COBOL legacy, but the web systems as well are so unreliable that if they want to take the company to the future, they haven't got a chance, unless they rebuild the systems. So again, that's what my role became, very different from the hands-on role I was doing with the teams and yeah.
Are you on your next slide that says team 2 now, or are you still showing the team morale slide?
No, I'm still showing the team morale one.
Okay, good. All right, just checking.
Yeah, so that kind of changed my role quite a bit. So I was going to just change to that actually. So this is the team, that's the second team that I came into. So this picture, I don't know whether you can make out anything, but it's very similar to when I stepped in. I couldn't make out one thing from the other. It was very similar to that situation when you come in and you've come into this new world and you think, whoa, okay, so there's no version control of things. A lot of the logic is sitting in all over the place. The versions on live are different than the version on test systems. And there is no strategy to deploy anything. There is nothing documented, so everything has to, and the security isn't there, so the systems are out of date and the servers are out of date, and we're getting DDoS attacks, and we're getting cyber attacks, we're getting all of those things, and the company is in desperate need for some change. So this is where kind of I sought out help from Alan, because I did actually feel at some point that I'll completely get lost in there, and I needed a coach to help me, and I'm never shy of asking for help. And Julie and Alan did actually help us a lot. They helped us create the system that that would then enable us to make sense of this chaos. So, but what I want to talk about really is if you are presented with a challenge similar to the challenge that I did, and what are some of the things that I found helpful, and perhaps it will resonate with you as well. The first thing, and I am going to quote Alan's book on this, Lead with Speed. And he said that when you have responsibility of something, whether you, whatever chaos you end up in, whether it is caused by your direct actions or not, when you take the job, you are responsible for what it is right now, its past and its future. So the first thing I did is I went into the chaos and I owned it. I took responsibility and I said, okay, in order to understand and make progress, I can't move forward if I don't understand this, and I don't really make it my own and really get lost in it to make sense of it and come out on the other end. And again, this is not a journey that is easy. And this is, again, it was at a different level. So it takes you away from the practical side of it and being an engineer, getting your hands dirty, to a different level where you are responsible for everything that goes underneath. And then you take responsibility, you own it, and you feel like you're going to, if you want to make progress, you have to understand it and you have to make it your own. And the next thing is then the stress hits you, because you figure out, okay, this is a mammoth task. How am I going to even make any movement in this? And I remember a TED talk I heard, and it was dealing with how our body responds the same way to stress as it responds to being energized and excited. So that's one thing I really held close to me. And I think that I took that and energized in the uncertainty, and took that as the ammunition I was going to use in order to reach out and try and look into the world with kind of open arms and see the problems that are ahead of us. I think it's important to point out that when the company was working before, one of the major things, and I think the core of Agile, is that you have to pay attention to people. And I know that people get too bogged down by which methodology you're using, and is Scrum cooler than a Kanban or whatever the new one is. The point is, nothing would work if you don't pay attention to the people. So this is one thing that me and my team, so again, a new team, and I am talking to them, and we're trying to build this, making sense of chaos. And one of the things I did was to speak to everyone. I spoke to all the engineers to understand their frustrations and their motivations, and what makes them happy, what they weren't able to do. And the biggest thing that came out of that is that they knew what the problems were, and they knew what the solutions were, but they were never heard. Everything was passed down to them top down. They were just told to shut up and put up, and that's what they did. And And so we changed that, and we kind of, me and my leadership team, and with the help of Alan as well, developed the processes around them. But at the key, at the heart of it, and something I'm really passionate about, is going to the people, going to them for the solutions, not telling them how to do their job, but making it as a learning opportunity, taking it as a learning opportunity, and learning from them. And that kind of helps in building the trust and the culture. It is a slow process. However, when you get there and you get the right people involved, that's where you end up. And for me personally, this was a huge struggle. And I believe that a lot of the people who are engineers to begin with and end up in leadership positions perhaps feel the same, that you feel like you used to be the person building things. You used to sit next to these guys and have this amazing time building things. And now all you're doing is fixing problems. Like everybody's just coming to you with their issues. You're no longer a cog, but I think cog in the machine. But I would say that in a way, you have to realize that you are the oil now that keeps all of the machine working. And you have to have an understanding that that too is an extremely important role. And your job is to foresee where the direction, where everybody's going and the entirety of the business and the teams are, and then build this team around it, which is your machine, and figure out where they might need help in the direction, and go in there and clear their way so they can go as fast as possible. And that is where your real value add comes in, and any kind of doubt that you might have had about yourself, you change that by knowing that you are the oil that keeps the machine going. And one thing that I've had to learn is that, and it has helped me by knowing that, I went and attended a course in Oxford University, and in there was this, leaders from all over the world, from various different industries. And one of the things that really kind of brought it home for me is the fact that even amongst those highly smart, capable, and accomplished people like yourselves as well, you need to allow yourself to be your own person, say your own things, and allow yourself to make the mistakes that you are going to make. You're still an individual, and I found that it was incredibly helpful to me when I allowed myself to fail in the process of learning, and just felt that I could be what I wanted to be, and I can make my own path through this. And lastly, and I know it's probably a bit of a cliche, but you do it for love, the love for the people you work for, the people you work with, the product you're building, the teams you are working with, the future that you think is possible. And when you're fueled by the energy that comes through something as pure as love, then it is then you become unstoppable. I feel that we in all that time we have turned things around now, from that chaos to all of our systems organized, delivering on time, processes in place, projects delivering, teams engagement extremely high, and people are generally happy. Our attrition is very, very low, and people get engaged. The engagement is extremely high. The creativity is high. You can see people buzzing, and this is something you feel. You are in the middle of them, and sometimes you sit there and you feel how much work, all of that work you put in, and your team has put in. You've come after a long journey, we've come together, and that's been extremely wonderful. So I hope that amongst all of this sharing issues, I was able to kind of tell you a little bit of my journey, and I hope that you found it a little bit helpful or interesting. And if you have any questions or comments, please let me know.
So feel free to unmute if you have a question, or you can type it into the chat and we'll ask it for you. But Seemin, one of the questions I had on team one, when those team members moved on to other projects or to other places, were they able to take those practices with them? Do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, so I do actually. So obviously after the project was delivered and delivered on time, there was probably in AXA's history, it was one of those that was actually delivered on time. They decided to move more people into the mix. So they didn't break the team entirely because they didn't want to break that culture, but they wanted to kind of copy that culture across other teams, like areas in sales and you know, their day-to-day development and stuff. And it was so they didn't actually have that much of, let's say, dilution of the original culture, but they were able to spread it a lot. And what they did was, when they went to other teams, they did a lot of workshops for them. Like they did the whole process with them and said, look, this is how we did it. Let's start and sit down and see how we can achieve it together again. So it basically blossomed from there and turned into a completely different, unrecognizable department.
So Brad Hodgins says in the chat, thank you for sharing the data. It was amazing to see the level of improvement from 2019 to 2020. Yeah,
great. Yeah, I mean, when we had, this is something that they used to share with us like at the end of the year, and we were super hyped about it. We didn't shut up about it. We were so happy. That's why I think that because we kept talking about it, the CIO was like, okay, come on, do a presentation, tell us what you've done. Because we really, and I think that it is important to say that in companies like AXA, you don't really talk to those people are just sitting in, you know, France or America or somewhere, you know, we're like teeny mini team in Bournemouth. Nobody talks to us, you know. So it was a huge thing when it was like, come on, have your hour, you know, tell us what you've done. And then they said, okay, now I want you to talk to the teams in London. I want you to talk to teams in Basingstoke. So we went and we were basically talking to everyone. So yeah, it was brilliant.
Okay, other questions? I have another question. So I think a lot of what you're talking about is creating a culture of excellence, you know? So I guess my question is, between the two teams, like, were there situations where people just couldn't thrive in this new culture? Like, you know, were there people that couldn't make the transition to that kind of culture, that maybe could hide or could whatever in the old culture? Was there people that weren't able to make the transition?
Yes, is the short answer. But I think that the longer is that we had people who struggled with, and you know, people struggle with change whenever a change is coming, and that's quite a significant change. What that level of data does is that it makes it very visible where those areas of improvement are. So the focus goes directly to those areas. You're not just blind, you're going in with knowledge. And that's what really was helpful, because we could pinpoint and say, look, this thing, basically our main core area is testing, for example, right? So we need to focus our attention on how long it takes for us to test things, and why does it take? Is it a skill set issue? Is it people don't want to write tests because they've never written them? And we figured out that most of the problem was the fact that the people were never trained in those skills. They had the willingness. So a lot of the times people do want to improve, because naturally we as humans want to improve. That's what I found in my experience anyway. But they were just finding out that because they weren't given the training and the opportunity to develop, or even told that that was an issue, and given the data to say, this is how you improve and this is how you can see improvements. Just data gives you that I would say enormous power, really, to have that conversation. But along the way, some people found it too overwhelming. It was just not for them. And I think that we amicably parted ways, because it's okay for them if it's not for them, and we kind of understood that. But I do think that, yes, there are times when it's not for some people, and then, you know, the people who with whom this resonates more would join your journey. Some people would leave it because, but I'm glad to say that we didn't have to lose too many people. We only lost a few, like a handful, just because it was too overwhelming for them, or they were the ones responsible really for building the chaos, so they didn't want to carry on. So it's up to them really at that point.
Well, like just a follow-up question, do you find that, you know, obviously personnel retention and turnover is such a huge issue now. Do you find that this helps you with retention and lowering your rate of loss of personnel?
I would say definitely the way we are working now has definitely helped us in retaining talent and attracting talent all at the same time, because all of our people who work with us are our advocates. They not only work in this system, they like it and they love it and they go and talk about it. So now we've been able to attract so many people. So it's a person has known a person who's known a person. And this, I mean, we're a small community in Dorset, and very, very difficult to hire talented people. And we don't feel that problem at all, just because people recommend us generally a lot, and the people who are here are our advocates. So so we find that tedious process quite interesting, and we love interacting with people anyway. I do, and my team does as well. And you know, we invite them in when we're interviewing people. We show them, you know, they can sit in with the team, have a look at the office and all that. So we get them a real feel of the culture, and we've been able to attract really incredible talent.
Seemin, have you ever considered running for the president of the United States? I think we need you. Are there any other?
You're very kind, very kind.
No, it's really amazing. You're very inspirational, and what you know, your results show it. And it takes a lot to create a culture of excellence, and you've done it over and over again. And you've done it to where people continue to propagate what they've learned. A lot of people can create a really high functioning team, but they can't create a high functioning team that can create other high functioning teams. So that is a true accomplishment. So
thank you. I think one of the things I would say that I perhaps didn't mention in my presentation is autonomy. When the teams are autonomous in the way they want to work within their own small teams. So what it does is they have this this goal that they want to deliver, but how they do it is up to them, because they know that what is the requirement: high quality, we want speed, we want efficiency. And within those domains, they can learn from their mistakes and improve. And really, that autonomy creates advocates. So I would say that even though it might be harder for higher management to have a feeling that they're losing control, but command and control is not the way to develop advocates for what you do. And true culture, in my experience, has been through allowing people to run their teams their own way, and then the changes and the culture is more organic that way.
I always say, how do you make teams trustworthy? You trust them.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah. You trust them, and they I mean, that's it. And I think I would say that's the bottom line.
So any other questions?
I've got a quick question. I find it a little bit difficult to cross-train my team. So if like we have 4 or 5 different skill sets and each of them have, I don't know, 2 of the 5 skill sets. I mean, we've got work coming in left and right. How do we get like the right amount of cross training? Because what ends up happening is I just throw, okay, this falls into skill set 1 and 2. Let's give it to that guy who's good at that. And then the other people never actually learn. And it's hard to figure out, you know, because it's going to be slower to teach the other guy how to do skill set 1 and 2. So if you can just like talk to the best way to get all of your team cross-trained while still developing a product that with quality.
Yeah, so I would say that the way we've tried to do is not to do such a clean-cut kind of training thing. So, for example, if you've got skill set in the teams, the natural inclination of any leader is to say, well, assign them that work because they'll be the quickest to do it. But what we've tried to do is have, and I don't know how your training and development kind of time works. Do you have some sort of like allocated time for training for people?
Not necessarily. We've got a set amount of stories that we have to finish with by a deadline. We're doing the 2-week sprint sort of deal, and we're just trying to get, this amount of work done, and it makes sense to just give it to the people who are the best at it, so they can complete it.
Yeah, so I would say what we changed, and one of the things we did in team 1 is we were very similar, by the way, because we had this test and development kind of speciality. They were testing frameworks and stuff they knew, and developers knew their stuff. And I think one of the things we did is to, whenever we are planning our sprint, to allocate time just for training. So give yourself the room before you make the commitment of training time for the entire team, whether you want to take the whole day out for the team every week, or whether you want to spread it out over the week or whatever. That is your uncommitted time, because training time gives you dividends over a longer period of time. It wouldn't give you an immediate kick. And I think that it is a difficult negotiation, but it is something that leaders need to kind of put their foot down to say, we have to take this training time. And therefore, when we're doing our sprint planning, let's say we're only committing to 80% of our capacity, which means 20% of that time is training time. So one thing is time allocation, I would say. The next thing is, how do you do work allocation? And in the beginning of everything, whenever we are learning a new skill, we always go down before we come up, and then we plateau. That's kind of the learning curve, isn't it? And I think that in order to avoid the dip and feeling the dip too much, is to allow people in the training time to dabble into the technologies that they don't get to work in day to day, and shadow the people as a part of their training who are working in those technologies. So that's how you start. So step 1 is you shadow someone who's doing that in your training time, and then you slowly take on some and pair up with them. And I don't know how much pair programming you do, and we do a lot of mob and pair programming, which actually allows us to share a lot of our knowledge and develop skills like that. So I would say that's probably how you break into that. And then you start assigning them the responsibility a little bit, maybe some easier tasks in that, which is easier to pick up and quicker to do, which would give them a sense of achievement. So if you are, as a developer as well, if you think, oh, I could really crack it, I could, and then you give it a go. And I think that it's the individual as well as the work allocation. The idea, I would say, is not to, in my mind, is not to focus too much on the process of how it might look, and work on the person. So if you know the person, and you might have people who are very enthusiastic about learning new skills and stuff, you kind of capitalize on that and enthuse them to dabble into those technologies. But training time, I would say, is the first step, that we have to have allocation within every sprint for training time. And we have always 20% allocation. So I would recommend that.
Okay, thank you.
So Seemin, do you find like I know that like when I teach engineering classes, I find people are like natural testers or natural designers, and they're not necessarily good at everything. Do you find, how do you balance like the need for jack of all trades with the needs for specialists with people's capabilities? Because it doesn't help to get someone to test if they're a terrible tester. So I think what we, you're right in that people are naturally good at things. What we wanted to do was not to have that as a limitation for our team. So it might be that people who are naturally good at testing tend to get involved in those stages more. So right. People who are naturally good designers would design things more and get more involved in those things, and perhaps not on the testing side if they don't enjoy it very much. But that doesn't stop us from training them in the skill set. And should we need it, there is still somebody there who's capable and has got the skills to fill in the space. So the idea is that your well-oiled machine keeps going regardless of who the people are. And it might not be, and if needed, you can reach out to them if there is a gap. So what we were doing before is that
the people who were writing the code, they just didn't do the testing bit, even though they might be capable, and they just thought we didn't have the skills. But this time round, if there was the need, they could actually step into somebody else's shoes. It all depends on what is needed for the job to be done. Our focus changed from saying, oh, this is my area, I don't care, this is your job now, to what is required for my team to do right now, and I will become that. So if you cross-train your people, people will naturally pick those things they enjoy or they're good at. However, if you need to, work can be allocated to them, something they enjoy less, but it's still something.
You know, it comes down to one of Watts's favorite quotes was that he always used to say, you know, you don't use a team to develop a project, you use a project to develop a team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So I know, like with my teams, we would always go through what is our team's core competencies and what do we want them to be, and how can we learn something new from this project? And like we'd have team goals and personal goals of what we want to be able to do. And then we would work that into our plans specifically.
Yeah, so this is something very interesting you said, because we have quarterly objectives. So we break down projects into quarters, and we every quarter you have 3 or 4 objectives, which is a mix of the project objectives as well as your personal objectives. And we amalgamate the two and then make your journey interesting and the project journey successful.
Right, right. It took me a long time to learn how to marry the personal goals with the project goals, but I think that's what we're talking about here. And I think
yes,
it makes it rewarding. It makes it a better project and happier people. So.
Yeah, I do think that it's like I said, it's all about the people. If the people you're working with are happy, they're more productive, and you have a profitable business, and they are producing code that they're proud of, they're going on singing your praises, you don't even have to do it. And that's where you want to be. Seemi,
thank you so much. I could talk to you all day long. I love it.
It's been great. It's been great, honestly. This has been a great, a great chat with you guys. I really enjoyed myself.
Excellent presentation.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you again, Seemi. And we'll see you guys in July, and we'll talk about the Watts Humphrey Quality Award.
Yeah, I look forward to that. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Bye now.
All right. Thank you.